Okay, as I just said, we're back, and in this video we're actually going to continue talking about the PC Power and Cooling 1200 watt silencer power supply review. This is the box it comes in. As everyone can see, this is a really awesome looking box. To be quite honest, I've never seen another power supply company package their power supplies as well as PC Power and Cooling does. We will get to the inside of this box in a moment, but first I want to give a very brief overview of PC Power and Cooling's company history. PC Power and Cooling dates back to 1986. An individual by the name of Doug Dobson started manufacturing upgraded PC power supplies in his garage for the original IBM PC model 5150. For those of you that aren't familiar with computing history in general, the IBM PC 5150 was the very first IBM PC. It was the grandfather of what every single IBM PC, Windows-based PC, desktop or laptop is based off of today. And even today, a lot of the original standards that the IBM PC created are still holding true. The problem that Doug Dobson was trying to solve was that back then, in the early 80s, the IBM PC came out in, I believe it was 1980 or 1981. Hard drives were not common. And I know it's very hard to, for those of you that are not familiar, it's probably very hard to imagine a time when hard drives were not commonly installed in computers. But yes, there was a time when computers did not come with a hard drive, and that's because hard drives back in those days would cost somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000. Yeah, that's right. Just for the hard drive and the controller for the hard drive, it would be a $2,000 to $3,000 endeavor. So they were not installed standard in IBM PCs. This was in 81. You go forward a few years, 85, 86, hard drive prices are starting to come down toward the land of the reasonable. And people are starting to add hard drives to their IBM PCs where they didn't have one before. By the way, the original PC only had two 5¼ inch floppy drives. If I had a 5¼ inch disk here to show you, I would. The problem was that the original IBM PC's power supply only had an output of 63 watts. And people would typically attach a hard drive to them where there had been none before and power up the machine and either instantly blow the power supply, or they would blow the power supply shortly after from the overload caused by the add-on hard drive. Oops. So Doug Dobson created the first PC Power and Cooling power supply, which was a 200 watt replacement unit for the IBM 5150 that could handle an add-on hard drive. And he created them with an extremely high quality internals. And because of this, word got around that these power supplies were out there. People started asking him to make power supplies for other applications down the road for upgraded computers. And what happened eventually is they established their own research and development team, whereby they would actually put out power supplies with higher grade internals than the other companies are putting out. And they did a lot of actual research into the environment that power supplies typically live in. And let me get into that a little bit further. The other power supply manufacturers, most of them, typically when they rate their power supplies, they do so as if the power supply was running at room temperature. Well, believe it or not, when your computer's on, it's not room temperature inside your case where the power supply lives. We're looking at temperatures inside the case are typically somewhere between 100 and 110 degrees. This is 40 to 50 Celsius, 100 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. When the temperature rises, if the power supply components are not rated to run at this temperature and put out the rated wattage at this temperature, the power output of the power supply will fall off. Also, there is a mathematical formula. I'm probably going to really mess up the pronunciation of this word. It's called the Arrhenius equation. And basically, the Arrhenius equation says that for every 10 degree increase in temperature, you shorten the component's life by half. For every 10 degree drop in component temperature, you double the component's life. Doug understood this, and he made sure that the components that he chose to put in the power supplies would be rated to run at the temperature at which they're going to live. In other words, inside the case, not room temperature. This is the big distinction between PC power and cooling supplies and the other supplies that are put out there. I'm going to also give a little story. One of my clients, who's actually a good friend of mine, asked me to help him diagnose a custom build that he had put together himself. And what had happened was he turned on the machine ran for about 2 seconds and then stopped. And it would not run again. So he brought it in, and I tried to power up the machine, and it would not power up at all. Keep in mind, this is brand new power supply, brand new motherboard, brand new everything. I check all the power supply connections, no problem there. I grab my power supply tester, I disconnect the power supply from the motherboard, and I plug it into the tester, and I try to power up the supply, and it still won't power up. What is going on here? A brand new power supply, and it's blown. Now, I have to say that this was an 850 watt power supply. I will mention the name. It was an 850 watt Corsair power supply. that should have been able to handle the system that it was in. This was not a super system. It was a typical gaming motherboard, a typical large gaming single video card system. The 850 watt Corsair supply should have had no problem with this, but lo and behold, what had happened was the power supply had blown. Brand new power supply blown. In the 2 seconds that the machine ran after he turned it on, the power supply blew. Needless to say, it got replaced. It got replaced with a PC power and cooling power supply. Not this one that's in the box, but it got replaced. I'm not even going to get into the fiasco that we had to deal with trying to get refunded or exchanged for this power supply, but we finally got refunded. And the PC power, when I called to order the replacement power supply for that machine, nobody could believe it. Nobody could believe it. And Tiffany, if you're listening to this video, you will remember this story about the Corsair and me ordering the replacement power supply for the Corsair that blew up. And we got the new power supply in there, plugged everything in, and it's still running to this day. It purred like a kitty from the start, and it's still gone. Now what I'd like to do is go over how PC Power and Cooling packages their supplies inside the box. Now, I'm sure everybody can see here how well this power supply is packaged. I've never seen any other power supply company package their supplies like this. They're very complete. They're very secure during shipping. You're not going to have any issues getting your power supply when you order from PC Power and Cooling. You can be assured that it's going to arrive at your location intact, barring some kind of major incident with the shipper. And they would have to really do something to destroy this power supply in the box. You get a manual. You get a bag that has the modular connectors. And I'm going to have to probably shut the camera off to get this out. We will get the power supply out of the box, and then I'll be right back with you. Okay, we're back, and as you can see, I've got the power supply out of the case now. And this is the actual power supply unit itself. Now, what is unique about this particular silencer power supply is this is the first in a batch of a new series of power supply. This is the first silencer 1200 that is fully modular. Now, what do I mean by fully modular? Well, as you can see, what's on the front of the power supply, there's no cords. There's just a bunch of connectors, including the connectors for the motherboard, which is the bracket that says MB down here. That's the two main connectors to plug in the cable that goes to the motherboard. And that's what's in this bag. All the connectors that connect to this block up in front of this power supply. Now, modular power supplies, when they first came out, PC power and cooling would have nothing to do with them. And the reason they wouldn't is because the technology wasn't quite there yet. PC power and cooling actually had to develop a type of connector that would not burn. And the typical problem that you had with the early modular power supplies is that the connectors would be a high resistance connection right here at the power supply. And for those of you that have spent any time around electricity at all, resistance equals heat, and heat equals bad. And because of the heat, the connection would literally burn at the power supply. I mean, it wouldn't catch on fire, but you'd see the pins get black, and you could actually look at the connector that was plugged into the power supply, and you'd see the connector would be black from the heat because the connection would be burned, which would also cause issues with the computer running in a stable fashion. So when modular power supplies first came out, PC power and cooling didn't have anything to do with them for like probably a year and a half until they had developed systems to keep this burn problem, the high resistance problem, from happening at the power supply connection. This problem has been solved. In fact, this power supply is in for an acid test. We are actually going to put this power supply through more abuse than it would ever see in a typical application. And we're going to put it to a real acid test, and we're going to see if it can live up to its name. I'm also going to do, which I probably will do in another segment, I'm also going to open up the case, which you should never ever do unless you have experience working around the inside of these power supplies. And I'll explain why when I open the case up. But I'm actually going to open the case and give you a look inside your power supply, go over what happens inside this box, and explain about the high quality components that are in here. I'm actually going to get ready to do that segment. That's going to be another segment, and we will keep going forward here. And I will talk to everyone soon. Probably, I don't know if I'm going to do the other segment tomorrow. We'll see. I've got some parts coming in that are for this computer over here. And once they come in, I have to work on that other computer. So I'm not really going to be able to work on this. What I will do before we go, if the battery will allow, and it looks like it will, is I'm going to go over the quality of the connections that are in this bag. Now, I don't know if you can see this. These are the power supply ends and the motherboard end of the motherboard harness. And this is the motherboard harness in my hand. And excuse me, I'm trying to do this filming freehand, so it's a little tough. I got the camera in one hand and the harness in the other. And we've got the connectors. Now, this is a pretty good shot, but I believe you can see it here because I can. The inside of these connectors are gold. Gold is the best electrical conductor there is. These connectors are not going to heat up under stress. They're not going to burn. They're just going to keep on going until the power supply itself decides to shut off. These connectors, the quality on these connectors is actually amazing to me. I was kind of excited to see what they were going to come up with when I heard they were doing a fully modular Silencer 1200. I was kind of excited to see how they were going to handle the motherboard connection. As in the other Silencer 1200s, this harness is actually directly soldered internally to the supply. So I was wondering what they were going to do here, and this is what they did here. And all I have to say, guys, is wow, looks like you've outdone yourselves again. It'll be very interesting to see what happens when this thing gets put to the acid test. And I'm going to get ready to do the other segment. I'm not sure if it's going to be this weekend or not. But the first thing I got to tell you is, you see this warranty void sticker? When we get to the next segment, I'm going to void the warranty. And we're going to open this thing up, like I said, and I'm going to go over the internals with you, including more details on that warning that I gave earlier. I will see everyone next time. And as always, feel free to rate, comment, and subscribe. I'll talk to everyone soon. See everyone later. Bye-bye.